Hello everybody and welcome back to the B1 podcast with Matt and Tommy. We are coming live and direct from Austin in a house in an Airbnb, but from Austin to dive into everything that happened today, Friday, of course, Tommy, not just practice, only one practice because it's a sprint weekend.
Yes, I forgot how much, because it's been so long since we've had a sprint weekend, how much they just don't mess about. One practice session, then straight into the good stuff. And then, on a Friday, we've already got to kind of see a little bit of the pecking order and how things are looking after what's felt like a very long break.
Let's dive into SQ1, where the bottom five were Piastri, Ocon, Albon, Bottas and Zhou. Obviously, Piastri. This is the talking point from SQ1. Disaster for him. Penultimate corner, ran too wide, lost his time. And he wasn't looking ultimately that quick throughout the session. And sadly for him, gets his lap time deleted and knocked out in Q1. Just as he kind of comes into this weekend saying, I can help Lando with the car, all this sort of stuff. And I know some people have sort of shrugged it off like, but it's only the sprint. And yes, fair enough, it's the less important session. But at the same time, 1-2 points, whatever it might be, to take away from Max is still something that every single one of them counts.
Yeah, definitely. It's the positive spin for McLaren fans is that it's the sprint, because there's not much of a gap between the top positions. But yeah, every point, of course, is going to count in this championship. There's a lot of points available, like Formula 1 keep reminding us, because there's so many sprints. So many points available still. So for Piastri to go out is a disaster for McLaren, big time. Got caught out with track limits, which we do see a lot at this track. A tricky corner that has caught out many people in the past, and I guess the thing with SQ1 now, you don't get many runs at all. So if sometimes only just one, so because it's a shorter session. So if it goes wrong, it really goes wrong.
Other drivers to talk about, Ocon obviously in the McLaren-looking Alpine, which utterly bizarre to see the car look like that today, if I'm being completely honest with you. It just feels as though Alpine are having this sort of overall identity crisis of binning off their engines, changing their liveries. They've had a red one, they've had an orangey gold one now. Yeah. It's just a bit odd, I would say, to say the least, and they still haven't looked that quick, at least in the hands of Ocon today.
No, not very quick at all. But I guess kind of expected where they are with just the midfield being so tight now.
And then, of course, Albon. So my crazy prediction's gone out the window already, which is fantastic news. So, of course, I backed Albon for a good weekend this weekend and to beat Colapinto in every competitive session, and that did not happen almost immediately when Alex was on a good lap and then spun in a drastic fashion. And a question from P1 Patreon member Ronak: is the pressure of proving himself against a new teammate getting to Albon? This was a talking point before this weekend. Colapinto has come into that team, come into Formula 1 and hit the ground running so unbelievably well. And I think it has to be a bit of pressure on Alex's shoulders. You didn't see this when it was Logan Sargent, his teammate, or Nicholas Latifi, or whoever it might be. But it does feel as though it's starting to seep into Alex's performance ever so slightly. And look, I think Albon has more than enough opportunity to be able to bounce back, but it does spell for a very positive future, I would say, for what Colapinto has shown so far.
Yeah, we've had this question actually a lot during our live shows that we're doing out here in the US, of people mentioning Alex Albon and how good is he really, because that's something that we've gone into this month break talking about, because Colapinto's done an unbelievable job. And of course, we've had many discussions on this podcast about, well, was it just that Albon had Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargent as a teammate, and how good really was he going to be? And we were waiting for Sainz to get into that car to see what he could do. But now Colapinto's there. Colapinto's done an amazing job. Again, really, really good job. It's not just that Albon's done a bad job. He's done a brilliant job. And yeah, I think the first few races, it was very, and I know it's only Friday, But if it happens again tomorrow, we're going to have to end the whole, well, let's not jump to conclusions, because he's doing an amazing job. And, Logan and Latifi never beat Albon, and now Colapinto's just doing an unbelievable job.
SQ2 then, and the bottom 5 of this session were Perez, Gasly, Stroll, Alonso and Lawson. Sergio Perez.
Here we go again.
Tick the bingo card. It's being spoken about again. Perez, not a good qualifying session at all. Max looked a bit steady at the start of qualifying, and Perez got within a tenth, and he had his lap time deleted, I think, in SQ1. And SQ2, just nowhere, absolutely nowhere. It's all well and good having that gap between the two, which you expect, but when it's as gargantuan as it is, this is where you have to discuss it to some degree, as much as we hate bringing the same conversation up every single time.
Yeah, because now, of course, Perez was kind of saved a little bit, where his form was obviously not as good, and Max was finishing 5th and 6th, but spoiler alert, Max is on sprint pole and Perez is all the way down in 11th. So that is a huge gap between teammates that you don't normally see in Formula One anymore. So, disaster for Perez. And a certain Yuki Tsunoda did make it into the session, and I completely agreed with the tweet that you put out that I'm sure Christian Horner is pretending not to watch.
No, absolutely not. P1 Patreon member Abu Dhabi 2021 Survivor comes in with Max is getting pole and Checo is still fighting the midfield. How much longer can this last? Well, it's lasted long enough as it is. I don't think that's going to change. That's pretty much, I think, our thoughts on that.
He'll go to the end of the season. Of course, he has a contract for next season, and we've not actually spoken about this, but he did the whole tweet, didn't he, of like, I'm not leaving and all this kind of stuff. But then also Helmut Marko came out in the press and said, I reckon in 2025 there'll be a junior driver alongside Max. So.
But anyway, Perez 11th. Let's see what he can do from there. Gasly, I think it's worth mentioning, had a decent SQ considering Ocon was knocked out in the first part of qualifying. Stroll out qualifying your go to Alonso because Alonso couldn't keep it on the track round the penultimate corner, which I think we should mention. They've obviously narrowed that exit curb to allow for the drivers to run slightly wider before getting the track limit warnings, but they're still struggling huge amounts with understeer around there. So let's go to SQ3, shall we, where the order was Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, Hulkenberg, Hamilton, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Colapinto. First question is from P1 Patreon member Alan Enderpay. Championship back off. Look, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. It's just the sprint. You've got Russell on the front row with Verstappen. I'm sure George Russell will want to take a nice little sprint victory tomorrow. I mean, Mercedes in general, oh my God. I know that we speak about this and their sort of practice to competitive session trajectory that they sometimes have, but they had one of the busiest, most chaotic FP1s you could possibly think. I think both of them were facing the wrong way at one point. They were both struggling for grip. And then you got Russell up in second. I know Hamilton, wasn't so happy down in 7th in the end, but Mercedes found pace once again.
That car is so confusing. I wouldn't put it past George Russell being like 8th in qualifying tomorrow, because we've seen that as a trend. It just seems to happen, where sometimes a car just gets into that window and is really good. For the championship back off, it's very easy for fans to jump on the whole like, oh, Max Verstappen, it's so boring. He was on pole by 0.012 of a second. Formula One has never been closer. He himself hasn't won for ages. So if anything, it's just another driver that's kind of at the front. And in the last 6 races, we've seen P1s from Max, Lewis, George, Oscar, Lando, Charles. It's changing all the time, and that makes it really good. You can't, it's not like Max is just kind of, they've put some upgrades on and Max is half a second clear of the field. He's not. No. His teammate's 11th, and he's just done it.
Exactly. And of course, Lando's in fourth, which is not the worst position ever. It's not as if it is completely championship off if Max wins and Lando's down in 12th or something. There's still a possibility. Lando himself said after the qualifying session that it was shocking what he managed to put on the board, and he was a quarter of a second off of Max. I know that there was a lot of struggles out there. It was quite low grip and drivers were making mistakes, but Lando, of course, very hard on himself anyway, but it did feel as though he obviously felt like he'd left a lot on the table in this qualifying session, and this is what happens. The next question kind of links that. From P1 Patreon member AMG Piper, do we think the lack of practice has affected McLaren? Now, there was a few people jumping on the fact that McLaren, I think, have brought 7 upgrades to this weekend, and then Lando was asked about this, was it not enough time to dial in the upgrades? And he said, no, the car's basically the same, there's not much difference. So he was very quite cutthroat with his response, and that is kind of how Lando is after a bad session. He's quite short with his answers, but he seemed to suggest that the car didn't really need too much dialing in. So where the problems are, perhaps it's just with general setup, but this is what a sprint weekend throws at certain teams, and McLaren are on the back foot slightly.
Exactly. I wouldn't put it past McLaren to have a much better qualifying tomorrow when they've had a whole sprint race and then another longer qualifying session to get up to speed. The fact that it's so close, it's going to change again. Like I said, from the previous question, that it's changing all the time based on just conditions and things. It's not just Mercedes that. McLaren have obviously had a very, very good car and seem like the best car, but it's not completely unbelievable dominance best car. It's just been very quick. So when other people get it right, there is a chance that Lando can and even Oscar, obviously he's way down, but that they can be in fourth or fifth because it's incredibly close.
Absolutely, and you look a little bit further down. Of course, Sainz was looking quite good in sort of, I think, SQ2 in particular, but then wasn't able to translate that into a final lap in SQ3. And other drivers to shout out, I mean, the team, Haas, 6th and 8th. I thought K-Mag looked so great, and I thought he was going to out-qualify Hülkenberg, but Nico put in a fantastic lap in SQ3 to be 3.5 tenths off pole in P6, and Haas, once again, putting themselves in a position to score a point or two tomorrow in the sprint, and Nico just doing Nico things.
Yeah, never underestimate my biggest flop turning them into the absolute GOAT, because, of course... Just like your biggest flop normally means they have an absolute shocker, normally that means that they're going to have one of the best qualifyings or races, and that is a performance that we've kind of seen from Nico Hülkenberg a few times, particularly last year. And my goodness me, Haas, from where we were all predicting them to be at the start of this year and being this joke of a team and not scoring any points, and we thought they were going to be stake are now.
Yeah.
And they're up in 6th and 8th, and they could bag a load more points.
Absolutely. So well done to Haas. Also to Yuki Tsunoda, who I think was the reason that Sergio Perez fell out in SQ2. So Yuki doing Yuki things and having another great qualifying and out-qualifying Liam Lawson as well, which I think is important for Yuki to just keep that confidence going from his side. And then, of course, Franco Colapinto. We've touched upon it a little bit with Albon and the discussion there, but he made SQ3, not just SQ2, but all the way through to the final session. Did have a little cheeky spin on his flying attempt, which put him on the, very much on the back foot for his final run. But, once again, the guy is just can do no wrong at the moment.
Yeah, he's performing so well. There's absolutely no surprise at all that he's getting heavily backed for people really wanting him on the grid. We've seen it's going to be very, very fascinating to see the rest of the year, because what's it going to be like if we get to, a few races' time and he's still outperforming Albon? I don't think, unless it's some absolute miraculous, amazing drive, I don't think James Vowles is going to switch them. It would have to be Albon poor form going into next year or something that would make that happen. I can't see it happening, which I guess for Colapinto fans is unfortunate because he deserves to be on the grid. And it's just a shame. It's such a shame that there's not enough seats because he's just a fantastic talent and 100% is proving he deserves to be on the grid. He's a breath of fresh air and hope he continues to do well. But unfortunately for him, there's no real seat for him.
No room at the inn, but I think he will be ruffling a few feathers in the Albon camp in particular. And, well, look, there are still 6 races to go. And if Colapinto does a lot better than Albon, then I think James Vowles, as much as I still don't think he would do that, there are some questions, I'm sure, that we're going round in his head. And that pretty much sums up, I think, Friday running. Thank you so much to everybody who firstly tuned into the Twitch stream that I did earlier when Tommy was out, which was good fun. We haven't really decided if we're going to be streaming tomorrow nor Sunday, but just keep an eye on the socials. If we're live, we're live. You'll see it. And also, our Austin show is just around the corner. It's on Sunday in downtown Austin at Emo's, and it should be an absolute banger. There's a few tickets still left if you'd like to come along. The other shows have been so much fun, and it promises to be probably the best show, with it being the last one. And, it might be a little bit wavy as well when we go out there with a few pre-drinks. But hell yeah, and if you're wondering or were a little bit concerned about the start time for that Austin show, it has been pushed back to 9 p.m. to make sure that you'll be able to leave the track and come along if you are indeed at the race. That is it. See you very soon. Lots of love. Keep pushing in the gym. Sweet dreams. Adios. And everything else in between. Keep
Penguins.
For those that have no idea what we're talking about, there are some penguin listeners out there. Thank you for continuing to send some random job occupations that you listen to the podcast to. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye!